and welcome. I'm Ann Francke. I'm the Chief Executive of the Chartered Management Institute, and welcome to our second Better Managers Briefing, where each week we try to bring you topics and conversations with experts for things that will help you do a better job of getting through this crisis. So today we're talking about mental health. And actually, it is ironic that we're experiencing such lovely sunny weather because we know that these times are very stressful for all of us. There's a huge amount of uncertainty, and it isn't only about our physical health, it's about our financial situation, and not just ourselves, but our families too. So it's really important that we do all we can to be more mindful of mental health at this time. And to help us do that, I'm really pleased to be able to have as my guest Simon Blake. Simon is the CEO of Mental Health First Aid, and that organization is dedicated to getting mental health treated on par with physical health. And actually, in today's times, as we know, that is very much needed. Now, we will have time to answer questions at the end of the broadcast. So please click the link on the YouTube video and ask your questions, and we will answer them at the end. But meanwhile, if I could please bring in Simon.
Hi,
Ann. Hi. So Simon, these are anxious times. People are confronting uncertainty, new ways of working, lots of physical and financial pressure to themselves and their loved ones. What are the issues, the mental health issues that we're likely to see, and what are some tips we can do to offset these? Break it down for us.
Sure. I mean, I think the most important thing to say is exactly what you said, that in times of uncertainty, people struggle, and we have got an overwhelming amount of uncertainty at the moment, whether that's, as you say, about physical health, whether it's about financial health, whether it's about your home situations, what's going to happen to the future of jobs. And of course, we've also got so much information coming through all of the time from so many different sources that can increase that sort of sense of anxiety. I mean, I think what is clear is that people will have heightened sense of emotion, and that may range from just feeling a little bit anxious, or that stress which comes with everyday sort of situations, right through to extreme anxiety and panic. And that will be for people who have got an existing mental health condition, but also for people who ordinarily wouldn't consider themselves a mental health condition, are suddenly sometimes finding themselves feeling extremely anxious. So, of course, there are all sorts of things you can do. From the first thing is to take a breath. I think the most important thing to remember in this time is to breathe. And to make those big, deep breaths, and to really understand it, to pause and to reflect and to talk and to have the conversations. But also there's mindfulness, there's meditation, and there's extra advice from Mind on their website about exactly what to do if you're experiencing extreme anxiety. The Anxiety UK website also has information. There are online support groups. And of course, we've got limited time to get outside, but getting outside, it's sunny today. We know that nature has a calming effect. So using that one opportunity that we've got in the day to really take notice of what's around us and to draw that in. But I guess the most important thing in all of this is do not bottle anything up. Make sure that we're talking, because as long as we are talking, then we're processing what's happening. We're allowing ourselves to understand that we may be feeling scared, but we're feeling scared together. And it may sound really simple, but that is the most important thing, taking the time to talk, to listen to ourselves and to other people.
So that's really important. And I think that plus, as you said, getting that physical activity in, many of us, isolated at home or overwhelmed at home with lots of family members, it's a very important thing. But on the point of talking, we know from CMI, we did some research earlier, that 1 in 2 managers really aren't used to talking with their teams and the people they manage about mental health issues, and they find it quite difficult. They're not sure how to go about it. What advice would you give for managers that do have to address the mental health situation with their team members?
I think the most important thing is that every single manager in the current climate, particularly, I mean, always, but every single manager needs to be having these conversations about people's emotions and their feelings and their mental well-being in order to connect to them, to understand whether we need to make reasonable adjustments. And so staying silent isn't an option. And of course, in the best circumstances, people would have had training and support to do that. But there is online information and advice, and we can put some links in afterwards in terms of some access to training. There's some online training and tools that are available for managers. But I think probably the most important message is we have to talk. If we don't find it easy and we're scared of getting it wrong, just say that up front. I know I've got to ask the question. I really want to understand how you are, what help I might be able to give you. And I'm not sure that I've got all of the information, but I promise that I will find out. So it's the same principles that always apply, I think, as a manager. If you ask the question because we care about that human that is sitting with us and the interaction, and if we don't know the answer or we feel worried about it, then we must find a way to get that help and advice. And we can send some links through for information after this webinar.
So one of the things you're saying is admit if you don't know the answer. That's okay. And admit if you find it difficult. But always maybe start each conversation in these days with a simple question about how are you feeling?
Yeah. So the question which we use at MHFA England always, but I think is even more important now, is how are you and what are you doing to look after yourself? And of course, we will all be talking hopefully more regularly to our teams at the moment. And so it's not this single answer that gives you the best clues. It's that if on Monday you say that you were getting out, you were going for a walk, you were feeling good about things, and by Friday realize that they're saying, haven't been able to leave the house, haven't seen anyone, haven't spoken to anyone, etc. Then you can spot the trends and you can say, there's clearly some changes going on. Can I just check whether I need to be worried about that or whether they are choices that you make? So that constant checking of the same question enables you to spot the changes, because that's the best sign that something is wrong.
Right. Okay. And you mentioned, people speaking with each other and continuing to work in teams. What can teams do together to make sure they help each other as well? Yeah.
So I think there's just, if I could just backtrack at one moment. So what we're saying at MHFA England is that that we need to start to create some morning routines or some work routines. If we're working from home for the first time, that there are days when I come down in my pajamas and suddenly it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's very different than the days when you get up, you get yourself ready and you go to work. That keeping moving, that we do seem to be doing a lot of Teams calls at the moment. Do them on the phone and walk around the kitchen table or around the flat or around the garden if you need to just make sure you've got some space. Staying connected, and this is where the Teams bit comes in. Really staying connected is absolutely vital. And where we used to get over reliant on emails, I certainly in my experience, we're using Teams or Skype or whatever it is much more now, and then making sure that we're reverting to support. But I think, what can teams do for each other? One, making sure that at the beginning of meetings that there is a check-in, that people are asking each other. Two, looking out and seeing whether they can spot any signs, in the way that people are talking, the way that they're thinking about things, and if that is so, raising it with their manager or contacting the peers directly. But also, for me, I think the thing which I'm missing most is that the moments of joy which just come from the little interactions in the corridor, or from seeing somebody, or you notice somebody's had a haircut or whatever it is. And so finding ways to recreate those. So we've got one of our team today who's doing a radio station from 2:30 to 3:30. He's going to ask me some questions. I've no idea what, but just bringing some music. We know other people are doing song of the day, putting out a Spotify, creating lists. A friend of mine who was always extra thoughtful has sent all of her team a little working from home care package this week. Making sure that we're just doing those things that create the moment of joy, I think, is probably the most important thing teams can do.
So one of the things to build on that, Simon, that we did this morning on our all CMI hangout was we asked earlier in the week for people to post pictures of their pets working from home. So we had some great pictures of pets wearing headphones, pets at the computer, pets wearing ties. And then this morning we looked at all the pictures and voted on the winner. And, that winner's lucky. The lucky dog gets, a care package of pet treats sent as a little prize. So just little things like that can lift our spirits. I think it's really important that we all look for ways to not only ask how we're feeling, but also to stay positive. And as you said, create those little moments of joy. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm missing my dog even more than I was. She's in lockdown or lock-in with my parents at the moment. So I feel very envious that lots of you had dogs to take photos of.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe your parents will send you some pictures of your dog and keep you up to date. You can always FaceTime. So I'm finding that dogs do respond on FaceTime. But, for managers as well, not only are they trying to look after their teams and trying to also connect with their leaders about the impacts on their organizations and having to take tough decisions. So it's really important that people leading the teams, for the managers, that they feel able to look after themselves. Is there any advice there?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. That it's often that managers will be thinking about their teams, but hopefully it's thinking about that peer support that we can have both within their existing teams within the organisations, but also joining on to webinars like this, remembering that we're all in the same boat. But that whole principle about self-care, making sure that we are building the boundaries for ourselves, recognising that productivity may not be the same and that we're going to have to spend more time managing others, and so thinking about what that means for our own workloads and having those conversations with our managers. But the fundamental principle has to be, we are not in a business as usual scenario. So what really does have to happen? What should we be saying doesn't need to happen? And spending that extra time with the teams and with ourselves and our peer networks, both in the organisation and outside, that we can really then try and drive just that sense of connectivity, that sense of well-being. And of course, that just thinking about remembering that eating well, not drinking well, not drinking too much, getting good sleep and doing what exercise we can are all some of those things which will just keep us well enough through what can be, what in really uncertain times that we've no idea how long they'll go on for.
Yes, I think you've made several really important points there. And I think managers and teams and everybody needs to be cognizant that not everybody is going to be as productive as perhaps we would be in normal times. And the reasons for this can be myriad. It can be that people are anxious, or they're looking after their kids and homeschooling their kids at the same time, or they're worried, or they may not have access to all that simple conversation that they can have in the office to clear something up. So having that awareness and being quite forgiving about human nature, and not expecting everybody to have everything buttoned up. And that includes yourself, right? So cutting yourself some slack as well as your teams, right? So you're not going to get it perfect. It's okay. We'll manage through this together. I think that's probably a really important point. And then
last thing I understand very, very quickly, Anne, is I had a really, really good conversation yesterday with somebody who just said, there's a lot of disappointment around. There's a lot of hard work which lots of people have put into things which are just no longer going ahead. And I know you cancelled a conference, we've cancelled a conference, whether it's Pride that isn't going ahead through to Glastonbury, so lots of people carrying lots of disappointment in that wider world. And that inevitably impacts on our productivity as well.
It's a very important point. We've had to cancel some wonderful things, as I'm sure you have, and the Olympics is now postponed. So it is on a global scale. So remembering, as you pointed out, we're all in this together. But it comes now to the responsibility. We've talked about, teams and managers themselves. What about the employers? What advice are you giving employers as to ways that they can really help look after the mental health of their people?
Yeah. I think it's about recognizing, isn't it, that everybody in the system has a responsibility to look after their employees. And clearly you've got all of the things around, clarity of work objectives, recognition of home environment, understanding, as you talked about, parents and carers with children, but also that there may also be children who have parents that need looking after. So employers, I think, need to be really, really proactive in communicating that they understand that these are extraordinary times, that this is not a business as usual period, and that they'll do everything that they can to both ensure the business or the organization continues to do what it can in the best way that it can, but also to take absolute care of its employees and other stakeholders and partners. And then that good, open, honest communication. There's nothing worse, I don't think, than people pretending that there aren't difficult decisions that are going to need to be made, pretending that we're carrying on as usual. So employers, again, needing to ensure that they've got the structures and systems to enable good, honest communication, the best care that they can possibly do. So we, for example, with parents and with the schools being out, have given some extraordinary leave, which any parent or carer can have, and that would apply equally if they had to look after someone else in the family. So what are the measures that we can take as employers to make these situations as easy as possible for people to be able to manage? Because let's face it, everybody's going to struggle at some point in some way or another, because of their own health, because of their family, because of caring responsibilities, because of whatever it is. And employers just have to do all they can to share that responsibility and make it as easy as possible. And that's tough for employers too, who've got to balance budgets, etc. So we recognise all of it.
It's a very difficult balancing act, and what we've said is it's a time for really leading with a great deal of empathy, right? We have difficult decisions. We are going to see financial and economic impacts, but we have to lead from the human side. Well, thank you for all of that wonderful advice. We have a number of questions, which I'm going to just share. We have a question from Natasha. So Natasha's asking, can you suggest any remote team activities that will help boost morale? Before I hand back to you, Simon, I can share a couple of things we've done at CMI. I mentioned the pet picture rally. Another thing that we're doing is remote Pilates classes. I know my daughter's company is doing remote yoga classes. So, even if you can't get outside, you can offer some of those classes remotely. I've heard of remote karaoke sessions. Simon, what other things would you suggest as team activities?
Yeah, so we've got virtual kitchen. We've had people, come to the meeting with a hat on. As I said, we've got the radio this afternoon. There was virtual bingo, people having virtual quizzes. I think the key thing that I would just say is, say to people, we'd like to give you some time to do some activities together, which are social activities. That's when I've just really noticed that the teams, what they need is permission to use some time, and then there are millions of ideas within the teams themselves. But so my recommendation would be free up the time and then ask your team what they can come up with, and maybe give two people in the team each week the job of doing Tuesday lunch, etc.
Great idea. Thank you. So there's a question from Ola on the subject of having to adapt to new measures. What does good mental health look like in the current circumstances?
Well, that's a very good question. I guess, what does good mental health look like in any circumstances? I mean, of course, the key thing that we have got to try and do is to enable people to manage the best they can in the circumstances they can, and try to keep as positive as they can. And so the key thing, I think, for managers within this is acknowledging and giving people the time to process, so that they're able to verbalize things which you may not otherwise do. So, if we ask somebody how they are managing or what they're finding, so rather than using questions which close down, have questions which encourage people to open up. So, which things are you finding easier? Which bits are you finding more challenging? So, recognizing from the start that there will be things we find easy, there will be things we find challenging. Asking people how they're managing the outside of the work context as well, so that people can really identify. And one of the things which I will often do in different roles, sort of in and out of work, is saying, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling at the moment? And where do you need to get to be good enough? Because on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 may not be the place we need to get to. It's really about whether getting to 5 would be good enough for people at that moment. And then what do you need in order to get from 3 to 5 or 5 to 7? Great.
That's a really great tip to use, and I think one that we should really consider. Now, here is a people facing an opposite situation to perhaps what we've been talking about. Question from Katie. My team is facing an increasing workload as we're in a key sector. Any tips on how to handle this? Well, first of all, Katie, one thing that I think is really important is that we all say a big thank you. I don't know if you were working for the NHS or if you're working in food retailing or distribution, or healthcare retailing or distribution, but you are doing an amazing job keeping the country going. And I think one of the things that we can all do is acknowledge the work of the key workers in all sectors, the NHS, the police, as I said, the supermarkets, because you are doing an amazing job. And I think everybody else is incredibly grateful. So one big thing we can all do is just appreciate the work you're doing and say a huge thank you. Simon, what else can we do for Katie and the team?
Again, I don't know which sector you're working in, and of course it's very easy to say prioritize, isn't it? And sometimes there are too many priorities to fill the time, but to be really, really ruthless about the things which can wait, and to make sure that people know that perfect mustn't be the enemy of good enough, I think is also important. And depending on where you are working, I guess we can all work on supercharge for a limited amount of time. And so the question which I would just really ask is, whether it is, for 4 days and then there's time off, or 5 days and then there's time off, or 2 weeks, and then how do we help people to know that you recognize that there is a turbo boost period at this moment in time, but that there will also be time to rest, recuperate, and recover, and helping people to manage and to think about the moments when you can rest, I think is a really critical part, and reminding people that we may be in for a marathon, not for a sprint, and helping people to really think about how they work in that heightened environment at this point of time, but that we are no good if we make ourselves ill. That is the fundamental piece in all of this, that we are all human beings, and there is no way that we can keep going, and that being open with people that we have to have you as well as we possibly can. So please, think about how you can take care of yourself in the moments that there are downtime. And I guess that honest conversation, acknowledging that it is difficult, acknowledging when there is rest, but making sure that at the heart of it, that it is possible to do what is required, and recognizing that people do have to take those rests, whatever is in your power and in their power. Because in these times, often we think that we're invincible, and actually we're not invincible, and that we need help to understand that we're not sometimes.
Well, actually, I was going to add in there, as we've learned recently, Boris Johnson has tested positive for coronavirus, as has Matt Hancock, the health secretary. So, that's a clear reminder that all of us are human and none of us are invincible. One other thing I think that might help the key sector workers is if you take the initiative to put the steps in place that protect you without waiting to be told to do so, I know that a lot of, for example, supermarkets are now enforcing the social distancing rule and having marshals to do that. But I remember reading 2 weeks ago, before any of that came into play, there was a supermarket manager who cordoned off the toilet tissue aisle and actually didn't let any customer buy more than one. Now, that's a great initiative, and it makes you feel like, you're taking the initiative to protect people and to help people. And I think that's the other thing you can do if you're in one of those key worker segments, is use your initiative to improve your own circumstances, because then you won't feel helpless. You'll feel like you're doing things and trying to manage the situation better. So we have a question from Jeff. Are there aspects of remote working that can make mental health problems worse? So, for example, expecting people to be constantly online all day to respond to chats. So before I hand to Simon, I'm going to say, yes, don't make people be constantly online all day to respond to chats, because we can get overstimulated. As Simon mentioned earlier, we have too much information coming, not only about this crisis, but if you are expected to be online all day on chat, as well as do all of these video hangouts and telephone calls, you will get overloaded and you will burn out. And that's not the objective of the exercise. So that's one thing for employers and managers. Please don't subject your teams to a bombardment of tools which make them OD on online. Simon, what would you say?
I mean, I think that the reality is that, yes, absolutely. And there are lots and lots of things which I think we have to take into account. So we know, for example, home isn't safe for everybody. So if people are working from home, what are their circumstances? Is there violence within the household? Work may have been a safe place to go, that there may be caring duties which are now 24/7 rather than 6 hours a day or whatever it is. And then people feeling isolated, people not being able to move from, depending on how much space you've got, you may be working, living, lounging and sleeping within a very small space. So I think we've got to understand that, and the better that we understand the teams and what they talk to us about. But I think let's not just assume that it's just about the work that's the problem. There could be all sorts of problems and issues related to personal lives as well. But this is where being a good manager comes into its own, isn't it? It's where clear objectives, clarity of what people are expected to do, a good conversation which requires people to understand that they need to be taking breaks, and you want to, that you're interested and concerned about their well-being, that you're still able to celebrate success, that you create that connectivity which you need in the team. So I think we are in a whole new world. There are all of those principles of good management and good conversation absolutely apply now. But I think just the one extra thing I would just say is acknowledging that actually being at home for people may be difficult, and inviting them to talk to you about anything you can do to help them is a really important part of helping people to think about their own mental health and know that you care about it, and that you'll help them to get further support if they need it, is a critical point.
I think that's a really good point, and things like employee assistance programs or mental health first aiders are, welcome additions and are available to employees. We have time for just one or two more questions. This is a really interesting one. So the government has stepped in and often offered companies the right to furlough employees for the next 3 months, where they put them off work because there's no more demand for their services, but they still pay 80%. The government pays 80% of their salaries. And that's a welcome relief for many companies financially who've been impacted. But the question is, how can we avoid people moving on to the furlough arrangements who may somehow take that to mean that they're second-class citizens within an organization? Any tips on that? And actually, we were discussing this earlier today, and what I think is really important is that we recognize why the furlough is there. The furlough is there to protect jobs. The furlough is there to prevent employers who've been impacted financially or by the regulations from having to lay people off or make people redundant. And that's really the first principle, is that this is here to help you. So if you are affected by this, then it's because, for example, the activity that you were doing is no longer allowed. If you worked in a pub and the pub is shut, you can't work. So, this isn't about you not being valued. It's that you can't work because of the government regulations. Similarly, if you're in an industry and you've experienced a fall by 50% of demand for your services, people will be affected. You don't need as many people to perform those roles in that organization. And so if they put you on pause for 3 months, it's because actually they do value you and they want to keep you and they don't want to make you redundant. So I think that is the first thing, is remembering why the scheme is there and what it is designed to do. Simon, I noticed that we're almost running out of time. So any quick comments on that?
I mean, I think I'd absolutely echo everything that you say. I'm in conversations with a huge number of people who are also saying, what about the people who believe they're being hard done by because they've got to stay at work when other people might be being furloughed? So the most important bit in this has to be honest, open communication, and recognizing that we are at heart, our emotion and intellect has to work together in order to process this. And it can only do that with truthful and open, honest conversation. And so I was talking to someone last night who's saying, the reality is that I need the people who are able to work the quickest and fastest because they earn the most money in the business. I tell them that. That's not to say to people who don't work quick and fast that there isn't a place for them. But in this moment, this is the time where actually the billing for that particular business is the most important thing. And that's, we owe that to employees. We owe it to ourselves to have those open conversations, however difficult they are, because at least then people have the ability to process the truth rather than make all sorts of assumptions and worries.
And I think that's echoed through all of our advice and answers today. Open, honest conversations, acknowledging that people will be anxious, not trying to cover that up, but also looking for those moments of joy and finding things to celebrate as we get through this together. So once again, Simon, great to have you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for your questions. We will be posting the useful links and circulating this webinar as well. And please join us next week when I'm looking forward to discussing the top tips on crisis management with one of the key members of the military who obviously have a lot of experience in that. So thank you to Simon. Thank you all for joining us. And do stay strong, stay well, and stay in virtual touch. Thanks.